right, so today we have a special treat. We have Greg Fishback here, who is going to be our special guest for today's video. Greg started training with us. How long has it been now?
Not too long. 6 months, maybe.
Yeah.
9 months. Something.
Long enough for us to get to know, some of your specialties and what you bring to the table. Greg has his own company called Defensive Arts Centers. And so he's going to talk a little bit about, why he chose to come and train with us and what he does for his business and how we work together to really kind of enhance both of our arts.
What we do here is we practice realistic, pragmatic self-defense in real-world environments. It stems from the fact that in my travels, a lot of what we do is firearms training. And in my travels, we were realizing that there is not realistic training out there. You're not able to do that safely. And it's a very necessary skill. It's a life skill. So we built an entire facility here so that we can work with less lethal and non-lethal tools and train very realistically. And that very quickly evolved into the use of less force multipliers, right? Because deadly force is not for everybody, nor it should it be, nor should it ever be your go-to. So you need other skills. And one of the problems with self-defense training out of the box, right, off the store. Let's talk about things like pepper spray, stun guns is another classic in there. Is they're not actually, in my opinion, they're not actually selling safety and security. They're selling a concept of that, and it's not actually a realistic concept. If you think about something like a stun gun, which I don't know how many parents buy their kids, going away to college, here, honey, be safe. What is that? I mean, that is a pain compliance tool, right? And if I hit you with a stun gun, not only have you lost face, then you're angry and you're also, twice my size. So what do I do at that point, right? So martial arts is, I think everybody should do martial arts. Martial arts is awesome, right? Do I have to admit, I've already changed at least 20% of what I teach based on the philosophy of what I've learned from you, because it's very realistic.
One of the things that I've always struggled with is the concepts of martial arts, sports martial arts, self-defense. A lot of people think they're all one and the same, and they're quite different from each other. And so learning how to differentiate between what is a martial art, what's a sport martial art, what's a traditional martial art, and how do those compare, and how do you apply those in a self-defense situation? At a young age, I was a big Bruce Lee fan, and one of the first things that I learned from him is that everything that he taught was, he says, like, all these kicks that I do in the movies, I would never use those for self-defense. Everything I do in self-defense is going to be below the waist.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, but in the movies, everything's high and fancy. So, and, like, as a kid, when you don't really understand that concept, it was kind of like, for me, it was mind-blowing and just a real big epiphany of there's a big difference between martial arts and self-defense.
Right. Yeah, and they're all beneficial. One of the things that kind of along the same lines that's very disturbing to me is people get into their little wheelhouse, and I'm a martial artist and there's no room for self-defense, or I study combat arts and there's no room for sport arts. And none of that's true. Everything is beneficial. Now, there's a local gentleman here by the name of Rory Miller, writes a book called Facing Violence. Now, from my perspective, from the Defensive Arts Center, because we don't have the luxury of having students here on a long-term basis so that we can actually work on martial skills, his philosophy is what a person needs is 5 or 6 techniques that get you out of 85% of your situations, and you have to absolutely drill those until they're myelinated. That's one of my buzzwords. Until they become muscle memory, right? They're absolutely natural. And I absolutely believe that. But it doesn't have to be exclusive, right? Learning how to learn, learning how to train. That's the most important thing. So I can come and I can train with you, attempt to empty my old bucket. It's always a challenge. But train if you learn new things. That doesn't mean it necessarily replaces my self-defense, right? Knowing the difference, like if I want to learn sword techniques from you, then I will practice those, right? But I'm not going to forget about the very basic guttural self-defense moves that we need to make our force multipliers successful.
Yeah. That reminds me, my background is as a designer. I was a designer at Nike for like about 30 years. And one of the things that we learned was the 80-20 rule, that 20% of all of our core designs are going to generate 8% of the revenue. And it seems like the same thing applies in martial arts. Like 20% of the techniques are going to probably be able to get you out of 80% of any kind of a scenario.
Yep. Well, interesting you say that. This is one of my philosophies, something I learned historically, is when I teach here, I tell people flat out, don't let me teach you something that you're not comfortable with, right? Because if you don't think if it's not right for you, then you're not going to practice it. If you're not going to practice, you're not going to develop the muscle memory. So it's a waste of both our times. Yep. So, understand, I have to learn my students' disabilities, handicaps, and where they're at mentally, and it's my responsibility to meet them at that level. And you do a phenomenal job of that. Your everything you do between your self-defense classes, your women's self-defense classes, and your full ninjutsu training, you're always ebbing and flowing in that world. You never ask anybody to do things that they're not comfortable with, God knows. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to be here. At my age, I have some physical disabilities, but we work around that. And I think that's a very important thing when it comes to self-defense, right? You can't fool yourself and think you're going to be able to get to a place that you can't, right? You have to know what your limitations are and come up with the best defensive or self-defense techniques you can within your own limitations.
Right. Well, one of the things I always kind of thought about when I was first, translating from my other martial arts and taking the Bujinkan system, I was so enamored by the coolness of the techniques and everything like that. But at the same time, with my practical background, I'm thinking, like, there's such an easier way to do this. I could just gouge the eyes right now. Why do I have to do this way complex technique? And it took me years to kind of figure out, like exactly what that's all about, right?
Yeah.
So there is like really simple, easy ways to, and that's what I love about, like making sure that my students understand self-defense first and foremost, because like the stuff that we teach is more complex. It takes years to learn and to master. But when you do have that skill set, it allows you to control a situation where you don't have to injure somebody.
Yes.
Whereas in self-defense, that's what your primary objective is to create an injury.
Yep.
And so being able to have the best of both worlds, understanding that, if push comes to shove, I can really do something really simple right here and get the job done. Or if I have the skill set, I can control the situation without creating an injury. And that was one of the things that I really loved about being able to.
Let's talk about that for a second, because that touches very close to something that happened to me when I was much younger. There's a very simple technique that we learned if somebody's coming at you, right, with two hands, and it's just a matter of literally that outside circle and then going for the eyeballs, right? Very violent technique. And I want to, for people who are watching, be very cautious in what it is that you train, because whatever you do repetitively, you will myelinate. You will develop muscle memory around that. This particular scenario, I was in my green levels in Northern Shaolin Kung Fu, and I actually had a guy, friend of mine, he was just a friend, he was just joking around as people do, rushed me in the parking lot. And I had been practicing that technique. And when he came up and he went to push me on my shoulders, I literally stopped my fingers about this far from his eye sockets, and of course I had to absorb that. It wasn't until brown belt, maybe black belt, that we learned how to do the same technique, but instead of that, boom, what we do is we take right along the carotid artery, right, in causing a reduction of blood flow to the brain, etc. So I think that goes right in line with what you were saying, is
exactly.
You have to develop, you can't stop. If you just practice a minimum set of skills, you're going to learn how to survive, but you're not going to learn how to control it. That makes sense. And when you start talking about things like firearms, etc., I can't stress enough how important that is.
Well, yeah, so one of the things that I love about you is that you bring to the table for our dojo is firearm skills, which I have a limited amount of knowledge in, so I appreciate your expertise in that. And we talked about the Mozambique drill, and we talked about that, how it's the same story, right?
Classic Mozambique drill is, most of you may not know it by that name. It's 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. You hear that. Well, that came about sometime. It was originally a military thing, readopted I don't even know how long. It's been a while ago, but the thought process was, if I put 2 in somebody's chest and then put 1 in the head before they hit the ground, well, the threat wasn't over yet. And what I teach is that is the wrong mentality. Nowhere is it okay to take a human life. We don't teach that. We do not teach how to kill people. We teach people how to survive a violent attack, right? And so as soon as you are no longer under threat, then then it's over and you have to stop, right? Also with my security guards, that's really important. So if you are training to put 2 in the chest and 1 in the head, what you're doing is you're training yourself how to kill somebody.
And that's what happened. So a lot of law enforcement were sued because they were unnecessarily killing people, not because they needed to, but because it was part of their training. And so, like you said, however you train is how you're going to apply it. So being able to have a training system that allows you to make conscious choices, I think, is the
and again, I stress that in every one of my classes. We start every class with a very deep conversation about how the brain works, and I keep using that word myelination because that's what that class is about. Muscle memory is not anywhere near deep enough, but I'm not going to get into it here. But trust me, when you are having to defend your life, don't fool yourself. People think, I've been training martial arts for 4 or 5 years. I know all of these techniques. And that, honestly, be careful. That is one of the drawbacks to martial arts, is there's this huge window where what you have learned is so many techniques. When you're under high stress, meaning you're having to defend yourself against potential grievous bodily harm, you don't have a prefrontal cortex in your head. Your prefrontal cortex, which is the big part of your brain that's responsible for helping you make choices and make decisions, is gone. All it's doing is going, knife, 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 knife. That's all it can do. So your ability to go back and say, oh, I remember this particular technique that I'm going to use, it won't be there. You go into what's called blackout freeze because you need to make a decision, right? So the things that you want to train are, and this is what I love about ninjutsu, is less lethal techniques, right? I need to know that if I'm walking down here and all of a sudden somebody just reaches out to me, boom, I can do what I need to do to get that distance that's not harmful, right? If all I do is pull out a gun and shoot all day long, and all of a sudden boom, and that's what's going to happen, right? I need to make sure that my reactive skills, because that's all you've got in that situation, are not deadly force.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know that you guys are not here just to listen to us talk. We probably, so
we're going to cut that out anyway. So
Greg and I are going to show something.
Sure.
I left it up to Greg. I said, show whatever you want. So it'll be a surprise for me too. To all my fellow martial artists, both instructors and students alike, as we get ready to celebrate our freedom on this 4th of July weekend, I stand before you not just as a practitioner of the martial arts, but as an advocate for the cause that transcends the boundaries of our physical discipline. I stand for children, and I fight against the heinous crime of human trafficking. In our martial arts journey, we have learned to defend ourselves and others, to protect the weak, and to stand against injustice. But I'm here to tell you that there is no greater injustice than the exploitation of innocent lives, especially those of children. Operation Underground Railroad shares our unwavering commitment to bring an end to this modern-day slavery. They are a beacon of hope, a force dedicated to rescuing victims and dismantling the networks that perpetrate these unspeakable crimes. Together, we can be a force for good and change. As martial artists, we possess strength, discipline, determination, and all this will help us make a difference. Let us use our skills, not just within the confines of our training halls and dojos, but in the real world, where children's lives hang in the balance. By supporting Operation Underground Railroad, we can become guardians of those who have been robbed from their freedom. Our collective efforts can give them a chance at a great and much brighter future, where they can heal, grow, and reclaim their stolen childhoods. Today, I urge you to stand alongside me and join this noble cause. Together, let's be a voice for the voiceless and the protectors of the vulnerable. Let us be warriors against human trafficking. Let us unite our skills, our hearts, our spirits in support of Operation Underground Railroad. I want to invite you to go see the movie Sound of Freedom. That premieres on the 4th of July, the feature film that is based on the true story of Tim Ballard, founder of Operation Underground Railroad, where we can witness the untold stories of bravery, resilience, and hope. This film serves as a call to action, compelling us to unite against the fight of modern-day slavery. Now, 10 years later, Operation Underground Railroad has rescued more than 7,500 victims of human trafficking and has helped arrest more than 6,000 traffickers around the world. I will drop some links down below and we'll give you some ideas that you can join the fight with me. I appreciate your support. Us. So what do you want to show?
Well, let's just go along those same lines, right? Because when we start talking about force multipliers, I started talking about the fact that we'll just take one of the major players, no names mentioned, in the pepper spray industry, right? I believe pepper spray is one of the best self-defense tools ever designed. It's simple to use. It doesn't take a lot of training. My biggest problem is it's built wrong, okay, along those same lines. When you train, here's what they teach you, right? Stop, don't come any closer, right? Right? And then I spray you, you've stopped at 7 feet. Okay.
Oh, so one thing that I see was like, was that in your hand already? Like
it was, yeah, right? Actually, mine's still on my belt, but yeah, that's it. You're holding it in your hand already, in right hand in this case.
And most people never have it in their hand. It's somewhere in their purse or...
Correct, and you'll see, like, this is a tactical rig that I designed. You can't get this anywhere because I 3D print this, right? And this is just a training one, but my regular one is all black. It is designed for real-world violence, right? Real-world violence happens inside of 15 feet. You don't know it's coming. It's an ambush attack, right? Mm-hmm. So by the time you're aware, this is how far it is, right? And so the design here is basically as you start to reach out to hit me, bam, see that? So what I'm doing is I'm coming in here with the tip of this elbow and I'm hitting you in that sternum as hard as I can. I'm breaking it, right? That's my goal. Now, what's a human being going to do when I do that? You're going to curl up. That's all you can do. And what are you presenting here, right? You're leaning forward. So now you've done this. So now I've either got up here into the head, get you to lean back, and then I'm going to pick up and I'm going to stomp as hard as I can into that guy's knee to completely destabilize. Why? What am I doing? I'm getting my reactionary gap.
So let's do that from the top. So I'm going to come in at you. Let's make sure we're in good range. Probably here.
I think we're all right. That one's got it.
Yeah. So I'm going to be coming in at you just like a double hand grab type of thing, of an approach, and we'll go slow, but I'll try and be cognizant of the attacks and how I would normally react.
Yeah, because I don't actually want to, trust me, I don't want to hit this guy hard because I will pick myself up.
Right, so I'm approaching here.
Right? Right, so here, right, I'm in here, and then immediately out, right?
So I just fell down there, probably out of frame, but for this camera, I think we cut it over there. But if I was still in a position to get back, this is probably when you have it already drawn out. So
yep, absolutely. Boom, right there. Right?
Okay.
So let's talk real quickly about something called reactionary gap. You have several of them, and this is a little drill that we do. And you can try this at home. Find a friend, okay? Stand this far apart, okay? Watch this, right? My job, and this is a seriously experienced martial artist, okay? My job is to do this. His job is to stop me from doing it just by blocking, right? Watch. Can't do it. I will hit him.
Yeah. And then you could always go hit him too.
Yeah, right. I will get him every time, but watch this. 6 inches. I'm going to add 6 inches to this, right? Every time he will stop me, right? Why? People say, well, you see him move. Not really. Not really. What that is your reactionary brain. Your limbic brain system is seeing, because I now have to project that motion. So what does that teach you real quickly is don't ever let anybody get this close, right? But from here, with minor self-defense skills, you can survive that. And so that's exactly what you saw me do. I'm watching him. As he starts to get closer to me, I know my reactionary gap. I know how far I have to go to get to that. How did I learn that? Well, we do some very simple drills on the heavy bag, right? What does it take for me to cross a particular distance and project power? And this is why you cannot do this necessarily yourself. You need coaching, I believe, to learn how to project that power. And because what is it? Kinetic energy, right? What is kinetic energy? Mass times velocity squared, which means your movement, your speed, has exponentially more force than the weight of your body. So learning how to project that is how a 120-pound woman can survive an attack from a 250-pound guy. but you can't think it through. You've got to experience it,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what we do here. I wait when he crosses inside, when he gets right to the edge of that gap, right?
Yeah, and so this is so critical. In the Bujinkan, Hatsumi calls his art he's the grandmaster of 9 different schools, but he kind of puts a tagline on all of his martial arts, and he calls it the art of distance. And I think that was the one takeaway that I took from my initial training, is how critical knowing critical distance is.
Yeah.
Right? Because like Greg demonstrated, it's pretty much impossible to defend against anything, one way or the other, right? So like now it's just a matter of who's going to attack first, and so
who's leading the dance is what I call that, right?
Yeah.
Because whoever gets on the back pedal is constantly having to try to catch up, and that's why I can go from outside. Like if you just try to hit me right there, you can't do it, right? I'm out of range, right? And I can shift if I need to, but I can go back. I can launch in, and if I can beat your timing of what I'm watching for, I'm watching that shoulder, right, or whatever. As I see you start to project body language, then I'm going to interrupt it on that half note, right? I'm going to come in, bam, and now all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what just happened? And as long as I don't let up for whatever I'm doing, that's why we do, 1, 2, 3, right? You will not be able to attack me. And what I'm trying to do is get you from here to here. Sorry, out of camera, right? I need the reactionary gap because it takes me half a second, at least a half a second, to deploy this. And that only happens because look where it is. It is always here. It has a finger guard on it, because if otherwise, put it in your pocket, right?
Yeah.
Think about this.
You're never going to be able to reach it in time.
No, just on this, right? 1001, 1000, even at 2 seconds. Most of you probably have heard of the Tueller drill, right? 21-foot rule. Most people have heard of it. 1.6 seconds, a determined aggressor can traverse 21 feet. 21 feet. That's longer than this room. And it took me 2 seconds to get it out of my pocket and use it. So pepper spray is pretty useless if it is not half-second deployable or in your hand. So as designed, it's a great talisman, right? Well, I'm heads on a swivel, got it into my hand, right? I'm not a weak target, because that's what 80% of all violence is opportunistic violence, or looking for a weak target. I'm no longer a weak target, right? I look empowered, and I go to my car, and I close the door, and I put it on, lock the door, and I stick it on the console, and I drive home, and I get out of the car, and I get jacked in the driveway, and there it sits on the console. Students coming in all the time, right? Oh, I carry pepper spray. I'm like, really? Where is it? Oh, it's out in the car. How's that working for you? It's just a mindset, and it's not paranoia. It's the brain can only go where the brain has gone before. This is a little a phrase I got out of a book called Seconds to Live or Die. Really important stuff, right? And because when you don't know what to do, you go into blackout freeze. You will stay in blackout freeze until you have a solution. The more solutions you have, the shorter that window will be. So my wife and I, when we're out anywhere, right? We were in a Greek restaurant the other day, a new restaurant. I'm sitting there, and in mid-bite, she's like, hey, where are all the exits? Oh, and we sit there, and we immediately talk about what we would do if. It's what I call if-then thinking, right? And so for you guys, in your day-to-day dealings, like all of a sudden I meet somebody on the street, we have an interchange. It's a great interchange, right? Thanks, have a great day, man. And I walk away. Then I can take just a second to go, what if that went bad? What would I have done? Let's say I went to shake that guy's hand and he went to try to put me in an arm bar or something, right? What am I going to do in this sort of a situation, right? And there are techniques, and if you've learned them, play the video in your head. This is a key component to myelination. It takes thousands of repetitions, right, to put something into muscle memory. Most of us don't have the time to practice something thousands of times. Most of it, when it comes to things like pepper spray, couldn't afford it, right? I mean, even if it's water, it still costs money. And Lord knows, in firearms, you can't afford to shoot those anymore. But if you've done it a few times and you can visualize yourself doing it, you're firing the same neural pathways in your brain, right? So if I had such a simple technique, number one, not letting him get that close in the first place, but the minute that hand started to come up and I felt him start to put me in the armbar, right? If I came in and immediately, just something that simple, right? Elbow across that. And so we have a normal interchange because this is just a delivery guy. You're an Uber driver, right? And, hey, thanks for my package. Appreciate that, right? Have a good one. But then when he's gone, I'm like, hey, what if that? Yeah, boom, I could do that, right? And you don't even have to move. Just move in your mind, right? Yeah. It's still training.
Yeah. So I always like to leave them with something concrete in terms of a technique. So that was a pretty cool technique. Let's kind of maybe teach that. So as I come in here,
right, and I don't know anything's happening, right? I'm relaxed. I'm literally shaking your hand, right?
So I'll just show you what it looks like. If I'm going to put you in a technique, I'm going to start to pull you off balance.
Correct.
Right. So that my first move is going to let me get you off balance, which is going to put you on your toes, which then allows me the opportunity to come in here and start to put on this arm bar. Right. So when he feels, so what's your trigger to know something's going on? It's like you're starting to lose your balance.
And that's the first thing I need to do, because this, I'm done. He's won. This is the 0 point. And if you don't know about that, study ninjutsu. It is one of the most important concepts that I've ever learned. And I didn't learn this until I was almost 60, right? But the 0 point is so important to non-lethal self-defense. And but the moment he gets me at a 0 point, I'm in trouble. So I understand what a 0 point is now, and I don't want him to do it. Now, nobody pulls me when we shake hands normally, right? You do this, right? Yeah. When he starts to pull, the very first reaction I goes, whoa, what's going on? And I've taken this wide stance. I've grounded myself. This hand is here, right? I'm worried about his other hand. I'm protecting myself. As soon as I don't need to worry about that, what am I going to do? Hip rotation. Everything is about hips, right? From here, I'm like, blam, right? Now, I'm still, move this way. I'm still on that strike. This hand is still here. I'm still cognizant of this, right? It's still protecting me. I've just gone from here to here. And I'm really targeting. He's kind of tall for me on this one. I'd have to bring him down a bit.
Well, that's good. So I really like what you did in the very beginning when we first started moving around. Maybe we can demonstrate that on the heavy bag, and then I can show a variation of it from ninjutsu. And so we can show two different tools that you can use on the heavy bag.
So mine are going to be just very self-defense oriented, very basic, and most of it honestly driven from my historical. I'm integrating, adapting, but I would love the opportunity I think this is going to be a rare opportunity, right?
Yeah. So, what I'd like to see is kind of on the heavy bag, show what you did against me, where I came in with a double hand grab, and then you kind of, I don't even remember what happened, but it was really quick, and then I got it, so it came high and then it came low. I remember that, and I remember hitting the floor.
Sure.
So maybe we can show that, and then I'll show a similar, heavy bag technique that you can use, and then I'll show it on the body so that you can see how it applies.
Sure, absolutely.
Perfect.
Great. All right. So one of the most important things about kicking, striking, elbows, close quarter combat is nothing to do with the strike itself. It has everything to do with the body. You ever take a towel, right? I can take a towel and hit you with a towel. It doesn't hurt very much, does it? But if I roll that sucker up and whip it at you, it hurts like a big dog, right? So that's kind of that philosophy. When you kick, it comes from the ground. You load. You're going to load your body for kinetic delivery, right? So in the first thing we were talking about with Peter, he said, my default go-to here again, if somebody comes in at me, if they're rushing me, right? The first thing I have to do is counter that force. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to lower my center of gravity. I'm going to load this leg, right? I've got 90% of my weight is on that leg. And then when I launch forward, my hips are square with you, right? But as I come forward, I trail with my hips, and then I unwind my hips. And that's where the horsepower comes from. It's that whirl motion, right? Distance is your friend, okay? So on the bag, what that looks like is this. Here, you have to learn your distance, right? As soon as they get inside that reactionary gap, back, okay? There was a lot of power in that, and it didn't come from here. It came from that forward motion, that launch, right? So, right? You put yourself in, you commit, right? You don't sit here and say, This is what I see all the time, right? Commit to it. Know it's going to work, okay? Then the flip side to that, depending upon what the individual does, if I hit him here, if it's above nipple line, then he's going to go backwards. Peter was tall. When I came in a little low, and below nipple line, he's going to lean forward. So when he leaned forward, my follow-up was to come up with that elbow. But for the most of the time, that's not going to happen. If you hit the right target, they're going to do this, and they're going to do this, right? And that exposes the lower. So from here, bam, right? Now, pick up and stomp. See that? Same thing, right? Take my shoe off. Let me get rid of these. So same thing. We've reset a little bit because the bag doesn't quite move as much as a human, but that may happen in real life, right? So elbow in, see that slight shift of the leg, pick up and stomp, putting 100% of my energy into the forward motion and the follow through of bash, right? Trying to drive that thing into the street, right? So 1 step, 2, and then always, if you're using a force multiplier, right? Stun gun, taser, pepper spray, whatever it is, stage it. You don't have to use it, but you definitely want to myelinate that, right? So anytime I'm bang, that drawing, presenting is very important. And just make sure you add that because you won't be able to think of it in the heat of the moment. It's got to be natural.
Yeah. So one of the, when I teach some women's self-defense classes, some of the times, I like the reaction when we show different striking techniques like you were demonstrating right here, which are very much self-defense related. A lot of the women say, well, I'm only, like 95 pounds, how is that going to work for me? And I usually have in the dojo a dumbbell on purpose, and these only weigh like 20 pounds or so. And I'm like, and you pick that up maybe 3 or 4 feet, and you're like, okay, where would you like me to drop this on your body where you feel like that would be comfortable, right? So even 20 pounds being dropped, right?
Yeah.
Anywhere on your body, it's not going to feel good, right? So imagine 90 pounds.
Yeah.
Right? So like you said, it doesn't take, a huge person to be able to do these strikes effectively. It just, like you mentioned, it's just
right.
How it's delivered makes all the difference. Putting all your body weight and focusing it into one single point is what creates the power.
There's so much truth to that. What is gravity? 9.8 meters per second squared, right? Acceleration. So you take that, the higher up you drop it, of course, the more kinetic energy when it hits. Yep. If you were to drop it and stop it and drop it again, well, then you might have 35 or 40 pounds of impact versus hundreds of pounds of impact, right? I'd have to do the math. But yep. And so that's why fluidity, I guess, is really the author's message. The fluidity of movement is what's so important. And that is what you're going to learn by coming to the dojo and working with other people and experiencing that slowly. It doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't have to be powerful initially because we're not as interested in the impact is how we got there, right?
Yeah. So let me show a bag technique that's a little bit different from Greg's. In this case, we, like it's all about distance, right? So we're trying to, create distance. And how do you, from a point where you're out of range, how do you break that range and go into range? So this technique will be kind of like I'm out here in a defensive posture. So here's my attacker, right? I'm clearly way outside of that reactionary zone. So I have lots of leeway from here. But if I'm going to take the initiative and attack, how do I get in? And then after we show it on the heavy bag, we can show it against each other so you can see how it looks like on a body. And it's important to be able to do both, right? Heavy bag training is great, but it's no substitute for having a training partner so that you can actually know how this works, because you need a body that actually reacts to the techniques, because heavy bags just stay here, right? They don't move so much like a body's going to do. So you have to readjust your distancing and everything like that. So from here, I go here and I just weight shift forward. This movement right here is really critical because it's a little bit deceptive and they're not really seeing, because right here I can reach. So if I'm here, like I'm way out, I'm in that safe zone, but it doesn't take long for me to be able to get from here to here. So from here, I'm just going to go here, boom, boom, and hit over here. So you can see there's a follow-up. Each strike kind of built on the next. So first one, second one, then I step off to the side and hit for the third. And so we'll demonstrate here now with a body, so you can see what that looks like. All right, so if you're, let's say right here, and I get to this point where you're approaching me, so I'm going to create this distance right over here because I want to be safe. So notice like
what are you doing with your hand?
I have my hands up, obviously, for being able to react. So if he attacks me, I can use them for,
So they're both offensive and defensive, but more importantly, from a self-defense perspective, it's a universal I'm not interested. And what's more important than that, you're showing the people, witnesses, that I'm an unwilling participant. It just happens to be a defense. It happens to be a really good self-defense technique. This is going to look combative. People are going, I'm not interested, right? But at the same time.
So good point. I appreciate you kind of going over that because that's really critical, right? Mm-hmm. And another little key point here is, as I put my hands up, I send my leg back, which gives me this distance, but I'm leaning in a little. My hips go back, and my chest and head come forward a little bit, because that gives me this ability to move in quickly, right? I'm already in the fight, just like if you were a sprinter, right? Off the sprinting blocks, what's that pose look like, right?
That's a really good point. I never thought that one.
Yeah. So this is the same thing. So I don't necessarily need to engage, but if I need to, like just come in as a surprise attack. So you
also showed me, like what I saw was just enough of a fade away that I'm going to try to gain that back, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing to remember is the human brain cannot do two things at once, right? We have to time slice. So if all of a sudden I'm adjusting my footing, I'm not attacking, right? Those two cannot happen simultaneously, right? So as soon as I realize that happened, I'm going to be like, I'm trying to intimidate you, right?
Yeah, and I'm creating a change. I'm keeping that safe space. And all of a sudden, I see like, here's a clear opening, right? So I might want to take advantage of that. On the bag, I use my fist. In this case, I'm just going to kind of come in with the palm. Boom. And now I have all my weight coming forward, so I'm just going to follow through this elbow right there. He's going to fade away, so I'm going to follow him and finish. And that's the finishing blow, right? So you can see how that's very simple.
Slow that down, that first one. Did anybody catch? I don't know if you can see it here. Did anybody catch the 0 point? You literally, this is something, Peter, you do this, and I think this is huge. If we've got time to do it. Remember the one about, show them the difference between the strike and that. You know what I'm talking about?
I think so.
Are you ready to do it? Sure. So this is something that just any hand will right up against you, right? What we're talking about, again, force, energy. What he did to me, when he struck, he did not strike like a boxer. He did not strike like this, right? That's that wrapped up towel. What he did was a kinetic exchange. So when he strikes, okay? It's a timing, and this, you need to come into this dojo and work with this on this one. Insanely important when it comes to that reactionary gap and distancing, right? We don't need to get into a fisticuff. We don't need to exchange blows. I will lose my, if we get into it. Look, he's taller, he's got longer, not to mention a lot more experience. But I can use that motion as part of the strike, but to extend it completely and then drive through. And what he did, if you couldn't see my feet, the first time he hit me, I went like this, and I'm on my heel. That's that 0 point. I can't move. I can't do anything unless I set the foot down. And if I'm setting my foot down, I'm not striking, right? So that's the tactic.
Cool. All right, so I think that pretty much wraps it up. Greg did a really great job with that. I wasn't even, I know it was coming, but it worked. It was so effective. It was more effective than I was anticipating, so nice job. Over now, guys. See you on the next one.